sometimes a story doesn't begin with life. It begins after it ends. Martha thought she had buried every piece of her past. Her husband Daniel's gone. His laughter, the lake, the memories, all silenced by time. But one quiet evening, her daughter-in-law's phone rang, and on the screen appeared Daniel's face, smiling, alive, calling from a number that shouldn't exist. What follows isn't a ghost story. It's a love story that refused to rest. A story of voices carried by water, of secrets long drowned, and a goodbye that came years too late. This is The Number That Shouldn't Exist, a story told by Auntie Donna, for hearts that still remember. If you love stories that make you feel, that stay with you long after the last word fades, then don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Part 1. The Call That Shouldn't Have Come the Ein. Afternoon sun had begun to fade when Martha arrived at her son's house. That kind of late golden light that slips through the blinds like a whisper. The house always smelled faintly of lavender candles and laundry detergent, the soft, sterile scent of a life moving forward. She told herself she was only there to drop off an old photo album. Her son had been asking for it. Pictures from before the accident, before the empty years that had stretched like a gray ribbon behind her. She stepped through the doorway, calling out softly, "Claire?" Her daughter-in-law's voice answered from the kitchen, faint but cheerful. "In here, Mom." Martha smiled. Claire always called her Mom, though it had only been 5 years since Daniel's passing. 5 long years since Martha's husband had taken his last breath in that hospital bed. Claire was trying, she knew. The girl had her own way of coping, her own quiet grief. But as Martha walked toward the kitchen, something strange caught her eye. On the counter, Claire's phone began to ring, a soft digital tone that sliced through the silence. The screen lit up, and Martha froze. Her breath stopped halfway in her chest as her eyes focused on the glowing image. A familiar smile, the one that used to greet her from across the dinner table, framed now in that cold blue light. It was Daniel. Her husband, her dead husband, his picture, his name, calling. For a moment her world stood perfectly still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Her heart pounded, wild and frightened, as though the ghost of him had reached through the static. Claire entered the room, humming softly, carrying a cup of tea, and froze when she saw where Martha's eyes were fixed. The phone buzzed once more, the screen still alive with that smiling face before it went dark. Oh. Claire reached for it quickly, fumbling with the screen. "It's just, I don't know why that happened." Martha's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Why is my husband's picture on your phone?" Claire looked startled, even afraid, her hands trembling as she set the phone down. It's not what it looks like, Martha. I swear I didn't..." But the words didn't reach her. They fell away somewhere behind the roaring in her ears. Because Martha knew that sound. The faint buzz, the old ringtone. It was the same one Daniel had used. The one she hadn't heard since the day he died. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her lips parting as if she wanted to explain, but couldn't. Before she could find the words, the phone lit up again. The same number, the same photo, Daniel calling. This time, Claire snatched the phone and silenced it immediately, her face pale. "I swear it's a glitch," she whispered, almost pleading. "I'll fix it," but Martha couldn't look away, because the name on the screen wasn't some random string of digits. It was Daniel's old number. She remembered every digit, the way one remembers a birthday or an anniversary. The number she'd called 1,000 times during his business trips, the one she couldn't bring herself to delete after he passed, the one that had been disconnected years ago, and yet here it was, still active, still calling. Something in Martha's chest began to twist, a strange, cold realization she couldn't put into words. That night, after she returned home, she couldn't sleep. The house felt emptier than usual. The wind crept through the cracks of the old window frames, carrying whispers of a memory she didn't want to revisit. She sat in her armchair, the photo album still unopened on the table beside her, staring at her own phone. Finally, with trembling hands, she typed in the number, Daniel's number, and pressed call. Her breath hitched as it began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. And then, a click. Silence. A faint sound followed. A breath? A shuffle? She couldn't tell. And then the line went dead. Her heart was hammering now, her throat dry. She called again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. The voice on the recording wasn't Daniel's, but it wasn't anyone she recognized either. Just a woman, calm and distant. "You've reached a private number. Leave a message after the tone." Martha didn't leave one. She couldn't. The next morning, she drove to the phone company's office in town, a place that still smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. The young man behind the counter looked surprised to see a woman, her age clutching a crumpled notepad with trembling fingers. "I just need to know if this number's still active," she said quietly. Typed for a moment, his brows furrowing. "Yes, ma'am. It's active. Looks like it was reactivated a few months ago." Her heart lurched. "Reactivated? By whom?" He hesitated. "Sorry, ma'am. That's private information. We can't disclose account holders." But Martha had seen enough. The way his eyes darted, the flicker of recognition when he glanced again at the number, told her more than his words. And when she walked back to her car, the late morning sun felt too bright, too harsh. Her hands shook as she sat behind the wheel, clutching the small slip of paper the clerk had accidentally left on the counter when she leaned over, the one she had quietly taken before walking out. On it, just one faint line. Account holder, Claire Addison, her daughter-in-law, the number that shouldn't exist, now belonged to her. That night, Martha sat in the dim light of her living room, Daniel's framed photo watching her from the mantel. She wanted to believe it was nothing, a billing mix-up, a coincidence. But deep down, something cold and certain whispered otherwise. She remembered the phone call that came on the night of Daniel's accident. The strange, broken connection. The voice she never could trace. She remembered how Claire was already there when she arrived at the hospital, claiming Daniel had called her too. Back then, Martha had been too broken to think, too shattered to question, but now she was beginning to wonder. The number that shouldn't exist was back. And someone, perhaps someone she loved, wanted her to find it. Part 2. The Woman Behind the Number. Morning came reluctantly. The light through the curtains was thin and tired, as though even the sun didn't want to intrude on the thoughts that had kept Martha awake all night. Her house felt different now. No longer her sanctuary, but a museum of unanswered questions. Every photo frame, every souvenir from the vacations she and Daniel once took carried new weight. She looked at them and wondered how much of what she remembered was real, and how much was simply the version he'd allowed her to see. The paper slip with Claire's name lay on the table beside her teacup, its edges crumpled from how many times she had picked it up, read it, and set it down again. Account holder, Claire Addison. Her daughter-in-law, her son's wife. Martha tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Claire had reactivated the old number out of sentiment, some quiet way to feel close to the man she'd called her father-in-law. But then why hide it? Why flinch when the phone rang? Why look so afraid? The question throbbed behind her temples like a pulse. By mid-morning, she'd made up her mind. She would go to Claire's home again, not to accuse, not yet, but to understand. When she arrived, the house looked ordinary enough. The hydrangeas by the porch were overgrown. A half-finished cup of coffee sat by the window. Claire's car was parked outside. Martha knocked once, twice. The door opened after a pause. Claire stood there, pale, her hair still damp from a recent shower. The look in her eyes wasn't guilt so much as exhaustion, like a woman who had been waiting for something inevitable. "Martha," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here right now. Then when should I be?" Martha's voice was calm but cold. "When the dead start calling again?" Claire's lips parted but no words came. She stepped aside, letting Martha in. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Martha could hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator. "Sit down," Claire murmured. "Please." Martha didn't. She walked straight to the counter where the phone had been the day before. "It wasn't there. Where is it?" she asked. Claire hesitated. I turned it off. Turned it off or hid it?" Claire looked down. Her silence said enough. Martha exhaled, a sound more weary than angry. "Claire, I saw the number. I called it. It's active, and it's registered to you." The younger woman's shoulders tightened, her hands clenching at her sides. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," Claire whispered. "Then how was I supposed to find out?" Martha's voice trembled. "By answering another call from a ghost?" Claire turned away, her back to Martha now, staring out the window at the barren garden. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller. "It wasn't supposed to ring. What?" Claire took a long, shaking breath. "I reactivated his number. Months ago, I couldn't delete it. Every message, every voicemail, and it felt like erasing him all over again. I thought maybe if I could hear his voice again, it would help me let go." She turned around then, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it would call anyone. I didn't think you'd ever know." Martha felt her anger falter, but only for a moment. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have said something instead of hiding it." "I know," Claire whispered. "But there's more." Her voice broke. Martha's heart slowed, heavy with a dread she didn't yet understand. "What do you mean, more?" Claire reached into the drawer beside the counter and pulled out a small, old phone, Daniel's phone. The one Martha herself had placed in a drawer years ago, too afraid to touch it. "I found this," Claire said, setting it down, "when I was cleaning out the attic last winter. It still had the SIM card inside. I thought maybe there'd be pictures. Something I could give you. But when I turned it on, there were messages. New ones. From after he died. The air in the kitchen shifted. Even the clock seemed to go silent. Martha stared at the phone like it was a living thing. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice wavered. "I thought the same," Claire said. "But they're there. Messages from an unknown number, all unsigned, just words." Martha's hand trembled as she reached out, touching the cold metal surface of the phone. Claire hesitated before unlocking it and opening the message thread. There were only 4. Each dated months apart. The last one just 2 weeks ago. Martha's eyes blurred as she read them. June 4th, 2019. You shouldn't have let her drive that night. September 11th, 2020. She still doesn't know everything, does she? January 23rd, 2021. The truth has to come from you. October 10th, 2025. It's time. The room seemed to tilt. Martha's voice broke the silence, shaky and thin. "Who sent these?" "I don't know," Claire whispered. "The number is always blocked. I tried tracing it. I even changed phones, but every few months they come again." Martha felt a chill spread down her spine. Did Daniel ever, before he died, say anything strange? About that night? Claire looked at her then, eyes red and haunted. "You mean the accident?" "Yes." There was a pause. The kind of pause that carries an entire truth behind it. Finally, Claire whispered, "He wasn't supposed to be on that road. He told me he was going to a meeting, but the GPS history said he was driving toward the lake house, the one you and he used to visit every summer." Martha's heart dropped. The lake house, their secret refuge, their world of summers and storms. Daniel hadn't been there in years. Why? She breathed. Why would he go there? Claire's voice was barely audible. "That's what I've been trying to find out." The 2 women stood there in the stillness, the phone lying between them like an unburied truth. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering the dried leaves across the porch. A storm was coming, the kind that didn't just bring rain, but revelations. Martha picked up the old phone and held it close, feeling its weight, its coldness. "Then we'll go," she said softly, "to the lake house. We'll find out who's behind this." Claire nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek, and as Martha turned to leave, the phone in her hand vibrated once, a short, sharp buzz that made both women freeze. The screen lit up. No caller ID, just 2 words appearing in the message window. "Don't look for me." Part 3. The Lake House. The lake had always been quiet in autumn. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, not really, but watchful, like the world was holding its breath. Martha hadn't been there in over a decade. The drive alone had been difficult. The narrow road still curved like coiled secrets through the trees. Fallen leaves carpeted the path in shades of rust and gold, the air sharp with the smell of rain and pine. Claire sat in the passenger seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Neither of them had spoken much during the 2-hour drive. The silence between them wasn't cold exactly. It was brittle. The kind that breaks if you breathe too hard. Martha's fingers tightened around the steering wheel as the house came into view. It looked smaller than she remembered. Once, it had been her haven, a place of laughter and firelight, where she and Daniel had danced barefoot on summer nights. Now, It was just another relic of a life that had begun to feel like someone else's memory. The shutters hung crooked. Ivy climbed the porch railing like something trying to reclaim what humans had abandoned. Martha parked and stepped out into the chill. Her shoes crunched against the gravel, and for a moment she stood there, staring at the house. "Are you sure about this?" Claire's voice was soft, uncertain. Martha nodded. "We came this far." They approached the porch, the boards groaning under their weight. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and the ghosts of old summers. When Martha pushed open the door, it resisted, swollen from years of humidity, and then gave way with a long, low creak. Dust motes floated lazily in the dim light that filtered through the windows. The air was still, stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and something older, the faint perfume of forgotten years. She stepped inside slowly, her heart thudding. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper his name. Daniel's jacket still hung on the hook near the stairs. The couch was draped with a faded quilt she'd sewn herself. A cup, his old mug, chipped at the rim, still sat on the mantel, like he'd just stepped out and never come back. Claire followed quietly, her eyes scanning the room. "It's like time stopped here," she murmured. Martha nodded absently, her gaze drifting toward the small writing desk near the window. Daniel used to sit there on rainy evenings, scribbling in his journals, always telling her, "Some memories are meant to be written, not spoken." The desk was covered in dust. A few old envelopes lay scattered, their ink blurred by time. But one thing caught her attention, a small black flip phone sitting right in the center. Her heart skipped. "Claire," she whispered, her voice tight. "Did you bring this?" Claire shook her head, eyes wide. "No, that's not mine." Martha approached the desk slowly. The phone looked old, early 2000s maybe, but newer than the one Claire had found. The air seemed to hum faintly around it, though maybe that was just her heartbeat in her ears. She reached out and opened it. The screen blinked awake. No lock code, just one missed call. The name made her blood run cold. Daniel. Claire gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's impossible." Martha's fingers shook as she pressed view. The call had come through 3 days ago. No message, no voicemail, and yet the signal bar was still full. The phone was still connected to a network. "Check the call history," Claire whispered. Martha did, and there it was again. The same block number that had been sending those cryptic messages to Daniel's old phone. She opened the text thread. There was only one message. "You came back." The room seemed to grow colder. Outside, the wind began to rise, shaking the branches against the windows like restless fingers. Claire took a step closer. "Someone's been here," she said. "Recently." Martha nodded slowly, her gaze sweeping across the room. The dust patterns disturbed, a half-burned candle on the table that hadn't been there before. Her throat tightened. "Why this place? Why now?" Claire's voice trembled. "Because this is where it happened." Martha turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Claire hesitated. "The night of the accident, Daniel wasn't driving home from work, like they said. He was leaving here." The words hit Martha like a physical blow. "Here?" Claire nodded, tears glistening. "The police found traces of sand and pine needles in the car. They didn't know where it came from. But when I found his GPS records last year, this was the last location he visited." Martha gripped the edge of the desk for balance. Why would he come here without me? I don't know. But something in Claire's voice, a quiet ache, told Martha she wasn't being completely honest. Before she could ask, a faint sound drifted from upstairs. A floorboard creaking, both women froze. Did you hear that? Martha whispered. Claire nodded, her eyes darting toward the staircase. The sound came again, soft, measured, unmistakable. Footsteps. Martha's pulse thundered in her ears. She reached for her phone, the modern one, but there was no signal. The lake always had terrible reception. Daniel used to joke that it was a blessing, that it kept the world away. But now it felt like a trap. She exchanged a glance with Claire. Without speaking, they moved together, climbing the creaking staircase, each step heavier than the last. The upper floor was dim, light seeping in through half-drawn curtains. Dust lay thick on everything, except for one set of footprints leading down the hall. They followed them to the bedroom. The door was half open. Martha pushed it gently, and her heart stopped. The room was filled with boxes, not random clutter, but carefully labeled storage bins. Each one bore her name, or Daniel's, and inside them, photos, letters, old documents. Someone had been collecting their lives. Claire bent down, opening one box. Inside were dozens of printed emails, her own, sent to Daniel years ago. Private things, words she'd written when he was traveling, when she was lonely. Martha opened another box and felt her breath catch. It was full of photographs, but not just any photographs. These were taken after Daniel's death, her standing by the grave, her grocery shopping, her asleep in her living room. Claire's voice shook. Martha, someone's been watching you. Martha's hands trembled as she held up one photo. It was dated just last week. She felt the walls closing in, her mind racing. Who would do this? Who would go to such lengths? Before she could speak, a faint vibration sounded from the desk, the old flip phone. It had come alive again, the screen glowing in the dimness. Another message appeared. You weren't supposed to see this yet. Then the phone went dark. A cold shiver crawled down Martha's spine. She turned to Claire, whose face had gone pale as chalk. What is this? Martha whispered. What's happening? But before Claire could answer, headlights swept briefly across the window. A car pulling up outside. They both turned toward the sound. Someone else had arrived. If you're still watching and enjoying this, I'd really appreciate it if you could drop a quick comment. It helps a lot. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your support truly means the world and keeps us going strong. Now let's continue. Part 4. The Stranger at the Door. The night outside the lake house was darker than it should have been, the kind of black that swallowed the moonlight whole. From the upstairs window, Martha and Claire stood frozen, their breath clouding the glass as the beam of headlights cut briefly across the yard and disappeared. Then, the sound of a car door opening, closing, footsteps crunching on gravel. Someone was here. Claire's voice broke the silence, a whisper barely strong enough to reach the air. Do you think it's... I don't know, Martha said softly, her eyes never leaving the window. Stay behind me, They listened. The footsteps grew closer, steady and unhurried, as if the person already knew they were expected. Then came the faint groan of the porch steps. 3 knocks, firm, rhythmic. Martha's heart thundered in her chest. Whoever it was didn't call out, didn't announce themselves, just waited. She glanced toward the old flip phone lying on the desk. Its screen was black again, silent, but somehow its presence in the room made the air feel heavier. Claire looked at her, eyes wide. "Should we answer?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. "If we don't, they might come in anyway." They moved together down the creaking stairs, the house seeming to hold its breath around them. The faint smell of damp wood and rain lingered in the air. Martha reached the door and, without turning on the porch light, slowly opened it just a crack. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat darkened by rain. His face was half in shadow, but there was something familiar about him. The shape of his jaw, the set of his mouth. He removed his hat, his voice low. "Mrs. Harrow?" The sound of her married name sent a small shock through her. Few people still called her that. "Yes," she said carefully. "Who are you?" The man shifted his weight. "My name's Robert. Robert Fenn. I used to work with Daniel." The name stirred something faint in her memory. One of Daniel's old business associates from before his accident. But that was years ago. "I'm sorry to come so late," he continued, glancing past her toward the dim hallway. "But I think it's time you knew the truth about what happened that night." Behind her, Claire inhaled sharply. Martha stepped aside slowly. "Come in." The man entered, wiping the rain from his brow. He looked around the room, the air between them thick with something unspoken. "It's been years since I've been here," he murmured. "Didn't think anyone would come back." Martha studied him. He looked older, lined, tired, but there was a tension in his eyes that spoke of things left unsaid. "You said you worked with my husband," she said. "What kind of work?" He hesitated, glancing at Claire. "I think it's best we sit down." They gathered around the small wooden table in the living room, the flickering light of a single candle casting long shadows on the walls. Robert's hands rested on the table, rough and scarred. He looked at Martha. "Daniel wasn't just doing design consulting for the firm, Mrs. Harrow. He was helping with internal audits, things that were off the record." Martha frowned. "Audits?" Robert nodded. "He discovered some irregularities, transactions that didn't make sense. Funds being moved, accounts and names no one could trace. He told me he'd found something big, something he shouldn't have. A few days later, he called me from this very house, said he had proof." He paused, glancing toward the window, as if the trees outside might be listening. "That was the last time I heard from him." Martha felt the blood drain from her face. "Are you saying someone killed him?" Robert didn't answer right away. "I'm saying his death wasn't an accident," Claire gasped softly. "But the police, they closed it fast," Robert interrupted. "Too fast. No autopsy beyond the standard. His car was found off the embankment, but there were no skid marks. It looked staged." Martha's mind spun. All these years she had replayed that night, the phone call that never went through, the unanswered questions. Now the pieces began to rearrange themselves into something darker. "Why come to me now?" she asked. Robert's gaze softened. "Because someone's been watching me too. For months. Then I got a message, no sender ID, telling me to come here tonight." It said, "She's ready to know." Claire's head snapped toward Martha. "The messages," she whispered. "Just like ours." Martha felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Whoever's sending them, they're controlling all of this." Robert nodded grimly. "And I think they're closer than we realize." For a moment, no one spoke. The house groaned in the wind, and the candle flame trembled. Then Claire rose, her voice trembling. "There's something upstairs you should see." She led him to the room filled with boxes. Robert froze when he saw them, the labeled bins, the photos, the quiet madness of it all. "My God," he whispered. "It's like someone's been keeping a dossier on your entire lives." Martha nodded. "Who would do this?" Robert lifted one of the photographs, a picture of Daniel at a company event, his arm around another man's shoulder. "That's Michael Avery," he said. "He was Daniel's direct supervisor. He vanished right after the accident." Martha's pulse quickened. "Vanished?" "Left the country. No one's heard from him since." Claire frowned. "You think he sent the messages?" Robert shook his head. "No, Michael wasn't clever enough for this. But he was scared. Daniel told me he was planning to meet someone here that night. A woman." The word hung in the air. Martha's breath caught. "A woman?" Robert nodded slowly. "That's all he said. Just that she knew something, and that she was in danger too." The candle flickered again, its flame stretching long and thin. Claire's eyes filled with a strange, distant light. "What if that woman was me?" she whispered. Martha turned to her sharply. "What are you saying?" Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "I never told you, but Daniel called me that night. He said he needed to see me. He sounded afraid. I told him I couldn't, that your anniversary dinner was that evening, and I didn't want to intrude. He said he'd explain everything later." Her voice broke. But later never came. Martha's chest ached. She wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but something deeper held her still. The sharp sting of betrayal she couldn't yet name. Robert's voice was quiet. "If Daniel was coming to meet you, and he died before he could, maybe whoever sent that message wanted to make sure neither of you ever talked." Claire wiped her eyes. "But why keep contacting us now?" "Maybe," Robert said, his gaze dark. "Someone else finally wants the truth out." Just then, a faint buzz echoed from the desk. The old flip phone had come alive again. Martha crossed the room and picked it up. Another message had appeared. He wasn't alone that night. The word sent a shiver through all three of them. Robert looked toward the window, his jaw tightening. "We shouldn't stay here. Whoever's behind this, they know we're together now." But before anyone could move, headlights flashed across the trees again, another car turning onto the long gravel drive. This time, two beams. Claire's hand gripped Martha's arm. "They're back." Martha's pulse pounded in her ears. She looked at the phone again, at the small glowing message that seemed to hum with menace. And then the screen lit up once more, the same number appearing. Another text. "Check the lake. Part 5. The water remembers." The rain had stopped, but the world outside still felt drowned, soaked in silence, in secrets too heavy to float. The three of them, Martha, Claire, and Robert, stood by the window as the new set of headlights rolled to a stop near the tree line. The air grew tense again, electric with the kind of fear that doesn't need sound to exist. For a long moment nothing happened. Then slowly the car door opened. A flashlight flicked on, sweeping across the yard. It glided over the porch railings, across the wet gravel until it stopped, pointed directly toward the lake. Martha followed the beam with her eyes. The lake had always been Daniel's favorite place. Quiet, reflective, a mirror for all the things he never said aloud. Now it looked like ink, bottomless and still. The phone in Martha's hand glowed faintly again. "The message? Check the lake." Robert's voice broke the silence. "If someone's trying to lure us out there, we should wait until daylight." But Martha shook her head. "No, the message came for a reason. Whatever's waiting, it's meant to be found tonight." She grabbed a lantern from the kitchen shelf, the same one Daniel used when the power went out during storms, and stepped out onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath her feet, echoing the steady beat of her heart. Claire and Robert followed. Together they crossed the yard, the grass wet and cold against their shoes. The air smelled of rain and earth, thick with the scent of pine and something faintly metallic. When they reached the lake's edge, Martha paused. The beam from the flashlight across the water had vanished. Whoever had held it was gone, or hiding. "Maybe it was a warning," Claire whispered. "Maybe it was an invitation," Martha said quietly. She stepped closer to the water, the lantern's glow reflected in the ripples, casting gold threads over the dark surface. She could almost hear Daniel's laugh there, low, tender, the sound that had once filled this place with life. Then she saw it. Half buried near the reeds, something metallic glinted under the light. Robert crouched down and brushed away the mud. It was a small tin box, rusted around the edges, sealed tight with an old latch. He pried it open. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were a few water-stained photographs and a flash drive. Martha's throat tightened as she lifted one of the photos. Daniel stood beside his car, the same one found wrecked years ago. But this image was dated one day after his supposed death. Her hand trembled. "This can't be real." Robert examined the flash drive. "We'll need a laptop." They hurried back to the house, the storm clouds gathering once more above the tree line. Inside, Robert connected the drive to an old computer on the desk. The screen flickered, then came to life. A single folder appeared. "For M." Robert clicked it open. A video file, dated the night Daniel died. Martha's breath hitched as she pressed play. At first, just static. Then, Daniel's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his car, the dashboard lights dim around him. His expression was strained, his eyes darting toward the camera and away again. "Martha," he began, his voice low, almost breaking. "If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it home." Claire covered her mouth with her hand. "I didn't know who else to trust," Daniel continued. "There's something I found, something that could destroy the company, maybe more. I tried to protect you. I tried to protect Claire too, but they found out I wasn't alone in this." He swallowed hard. "If Robert's still alive, he'll know what to do. Tell him, the lake. Tell him the water remembers." Then, a noise, a sudden thud from outside the car. Daniel turned, eyes wide, the camera shaking violently. A woman's voice, faint, urgent. "Daniel, please, get out!" Then the image blurred, the sound rising into chaos. A crash, a sharp intake of breath. The screen went black. Martha froze, her entire body trembling. That voice. It can't be. Robert leaned forward. "You recognized it?" She nodded slowly, tears blurring her vision. "It sounded like—" She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Claire. Her. Claire's face went pale. That's impossible. I wasn't there. I swear. But Martha could see the cracks forming, the flicker of doubt in Claire's eyes, the silent weight of something long buried. Robert spoke quietly. Maybe it's not as simple as you think. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. The storm had returned wilder this time, as if the world itself was responding to what they'd unearthed. Martha replayed the video. This time she focused on the background. The faint reflection in the car window, a flash of headlights, a silhouette moving closer. "Pause," she whispered. Robert froze the frame. The reflection was blurry but distinct. A woman's figure, standing at the driver's side, hair whipping in the wind. Martha's voice cracked. "That's not Claire." Claire leaned in, her eyes wide. "Then who—" The lights went out. The house plunged into darkness. The computer screen flickered once, twice, and then went black. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then, from the far corner of the room, the old flip phone began to ring. The sound was shrill, piercing, almost human. Martha reached for it, her hand shaking. She flipped it open. No number this time. Just the word private. She pressed answer. Static. Then faintly, and a voice. "Martha." It was Daniel's voice. Soft. Familiar. Terrified. "Don't trust." The line went dead. Martha stood motionless, the phone still pressed to her ear, the echo of his voice ringing inside her chest. Claire clutched her arm. "What did he say?" Martha turned slowly, her eyes glistening. "He said not to trust someone." Robert's expression darkened. "Who?" Before she could answer, thunder cracked outside, so close it shook the windows. The old photograph box toppled from the shelf, spilling its contents across the floor. Among the papers lay a single envelope, sealed and yellowed with age. Martha bent to pick it up. Her name was written across it in Daniel's handwriting. Inside, a single note. "If anything happens to me, look for her. The woman by the lake." Martha looked up at Claire. The younger woman's face was ghostly pale, eyes brimming with confusion and fear. "I swear," Claire whispered. I don't know who she was, but something in her tone, a tremor too subtle to fake, told Martha she was hiding something. The lantern flickered again. In the faint light, the window pane behind them caught a reflection. A figure standing outside by the trees, watching. And when the next flash of lightning came, the figure was gone. Only the imprint of wet footprints led back toward the lake. To be continued, Part 6, The Woman by the Lake, where the truth begins to surface, one haunting revelation at a time. Would you like me to write Part 6 now, Auntie Donna? In the same emotional, cinematic tone as the story deepens into the mystery of who the woman by the lake truly was. You said yes, ChatGPT said, wonderful, Auntie Donna. Let's return to the storm-soaked quiet of the lake house, to that cinematic hush where grief meets revelation. Here begins the next haunting chapter, written in your Voices of Auntie Donna tone. Soft, human, emotional, and deeply visual. Part 6, The Woman by the Lake, 1,200 words. The storm didn't pass. It lingered like a confession half-spoken. Rain slid down the window panes in thin, nervous streaks. Every few seconds, lightning carved the sky open, revealing the trees bending, whispering, almost bowing toward the lake. Inside the house, silence clung to the walls. Martha sat at the edge of the couch, the envelope still trembling in her hand. Daniel's handwriting, those looping, careful letters, felt alive beneath her fingers. The woman by the lake, the words echoed, and somewhere deep inside her, a memory stirred. Years ago, before Daniel's death, the lake had been their sanctuary. She could still see him standing at the dock at sunset, his reflection stretching long and golden across the water. That summer, a woman had come to the lake, a quiet stranger renting the small cabin across the inlet. She had said her name was Elise Grant, a writer, researching a novel about loss. Martha hadn't thought about her in years. But now, the memory rose like something long submerged. Elise had been kind, curious, always asking questions about Daniel's work, about the house, about the old landline that never quite worked. Daniel had brushed it off, said she was lonely. But Martha remembered the way Elise had looked at him, with the kind of familiarity that didn't belong to strangers. And now, all these years later, Daniel's note had whispered her back to life. "Martha?" Claire's voice was soft, uncertain. She stood near the window, arms crossed tight against her chest. "You know who she is, don't you?" Martha didn't answer right away. She felt Robert's eyes on her, heavy, watchful. "She was staying across the lake," Martha said finally. "The summer before Daniel died." "A writer," Robert frowned. "That cabin's been abandoned for years." "Yes," Martha murmured, "but someone was there tonight." Claire looked pale, almost translucent in the flickering lamplight. "Maybe she came back," Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. "Or maybe she never left." The wind rose, rattling the shutters again. Robert grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the door. "If there's a cabin, we'll find it." Martha hesitated, then followed. Claire trailed behind, her face unreadable. They crossed the yard, the mud pulling at their boots, the rain cold against their faces. The lake shimmered ahead, black and vast. Across the water, faint through the trees, a light flickered once. Then again. "There," Martha breathed. The path was overgrown, nearly lost to time. Branches clawed at their clothes as they climbed the narrow ridge. The rain had turned the earth soft. Their footprints sank deep, temporary as truth itself. At last, they saw it. A small cabin, its porch caved in, its windows clouded with dust. But the door was open. Robert lifted his flashlight. "Stay behind me." Inside, the air was heavy with damp wood and something faintly floral. Lavender, maybe, or memory. The cabin was nearly empty. Just a desk, a single chair, and a stack of yellowed papers. The walls were lined with photographs, printed in black and white, all of them of Daniel. Claire covered her mouth. "Oh my God," Martha stepped closer. Each photograph was marked with dates, notes in neat cursive writing, Elise's handwriting, observations. Meeting at the lake, 7:15 p.m. He's hiding something. He doesn't know I know. In the center of the wall, one photograph stood apart. Daniel and Elise together, by the dock, smiling. And behind them, faint but unmistakable, the outline of the same car that had gone off the road that night. Robert scanned the room, his expression grim. She was watching him. "Maybe blackmailing him," Martha's voice was distant. "Or helping him." Robert turned to her. "You think she was involved in whatever he uncovered?" Martha didn't answer. Her eyes had fallen to the desk, where a leather-bound journal lay open. The last entry read, "He promised tonight would be the end of it." He said he'd finally tell her the truth. But the truth doesn't end things. It begins them, and beneath it, a small Polaroid tucked into the page. Daniel again. Only this time he wasn't smiling. His eyes looked frightened, and beside him stood Claire. Martha's breath hitched. Claire stepped back as if struck. "That's not real. That's not—" But Martha's voice cut through her denial. "You were there." Claire shook her head violently. "No, I swear, someone's setting this up. Daniel called me that night, but I never met him." Robert studied the photo. It's real film. No editing, no digital trick. Martha turned to Claire, her voice trembling but cold. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears filled Claire's eyes. "Because I thought I'd caused it. He called me, said he was scared. He wanted to meet, but when I got there, his car was gone. I waited by the lake, but," her voice broke, "I heard the crash, and I ran." The confession hung heavy in the room. Robert's jaw tightened. "So you were the woman by the lake?" Claire's shoulders sagged. "Yes, but I swear I didn't kill him. Someone else was there. I saw headlights, another car, just before his went off the road." Martha's heart pounded. The image of the reflection in the video returned to her. That other figure moving through the dark. Robert spoke quietly. "Then the question is, whose car was it?" Lightning flashed outside, flooding the cabin with white light. For one heartbeat, another shadow appeared on the wall, a silhouette standing just outside the window. Claire gasped. "Someone's there!" Robert spun toward the door, but it slammed shut with a violent crack. The lantern blew out, plunging them into darkness. Martha clutched the desk, her breath shallow. From outside came the faint sound of footsteps circling the porch. Then, a soft, deliberate knock, 3 times, just like before. Robert pulled the door open. Rain poured in, but no one stood there. Only the forest and the whisper of water against the shore. And then, the sound of a phone ringing. But it wasn't Martha's old flip phone this time. It was coming from inside the cabin, from somewhere beneath the floorboards. Robert knelt, pried up one of the warped planks, and pulled out a second phone. Older, scratched, but still glowing faintly. A number flashed across the screen. Daniel Harrow. Martha's blood ran cold. Robert answered, putting it on speaker. Static filled the room, followed by a soft, broken whisper. "Martha, it wasn't an accident." The voice cracked, warped by time. "Daniel's unmistakably. I thought I could protect you, but she knew. She knew everything." Then silence. The call ended. The screen went dark. Martha's tears blurred the edges of the world. "He's still trying to tell us." Robert stared at the phone. "Or someone's making sure we don't forget." Outside, thunder rolled over the lake, deep, final, like a closing door. And as they turned to leave, Martha glanced back one last time. Through the cabin window, lightning struck again. For the briefest instant in the reflection of the glass, she saw Daniel standing at the edge of the dock. Not ghostly, not fading, but waiting, as if the water truly did remember. Part 7. The Truth. Beneath the water by morning, the storm had quieted, but the lake had changed. It no longer shimmered the way it used to. Now it was heavy, opaque, still as glass yet restless beneath. the kind of stillness that waits for something to surface. Inside the cabin, the fire Robert had started burned low. The three of them sat in silence, the second phone resting on the table between them. Its cracked screen lifeless now, as though it had never rung at all. No one had slept. Not really. Martha stared at the lake through the fogged window, her eyes tracing the path Daniel used to take to the dock. The memory of his voice, she knew everything, echoed in her mind like a riddle. Claire spoke first, her voice thin and frayed. He said she. That means Elise. It has to. Robert nodded slowly. Then the question is, what did she know? Martha turned toward him, her voice low, deliberate. Something big enough for Daniel to die for. Something big enough for someone to want to keep buried. Robert looked at her, not with suspicion, but with that same quiet dread that comes from recognizing a truth too close to home. There's a storage dock at the far end of the lake, old company property. Daniel and I used to move prototypes through there before the company shut down. If he hid anything, it would be there. Martha's pulse quickened. Then that's where we'll go. The day was gray and breathless. Mist hung over the water like torn silk. The three of them crossed the shoreline, their boots crunching over gravel and fallen reeds. The old dock loomed ahead, splintered, half swallowed by the lake. Time had eaten away at the boards, leaving gaps wide enough to see the dark water shifting below. At the far end stood an old metal shed, padlocked and rusted. Robert forced it open with a crowbar, the lock snapping after a struggle. Inside was the faint smell of oil and paper. Boxes lined the walls, all marked with Daniel's old handwriting. Claire stepped forward. He really was hiding something. They began sorting through the boxes, invoices, letters, old hard drives. Then, at the bottom of one stack, Martha found a file labeled Project Call Sign. She opened it, and her heart dropped. Photographs of testing sites, receipts for off-the-books payments, and documents signed not only by Daniel, but by Robert. Her gaze lifted, sharp and disbelieving. You were part of this. Robert froze. Martha, she shoved the file toward him. You knew. All these years you knew what he was involved in. Robert's jaw tightened. I tried to stop it. The company was laundering money through fake R&D projects. Daniel uncovered it. I warned him it wasn't safe, Claire frowned. But if you knew, why didn't you tell anyone? Because I was the one who found him that night, Robert said quietly. After the crash. The words hung heavy. Martha's breath caught. You found him? He nodded slowly. The car was already burning. He was alive when I reached him. Barely. He gave me a flash drive and said, "Get it to Martha." But before I could, the second car came back. Claire's eyes widened. You mean the other car you mentioned? Yes, Robert said. I saw the driver's face for a second. A woman. I thought it was Elise, but now... He trailed off, his gaze flicking toward Claire. Claire stiffened. What are you implying? Robert's voice was even, too calm. I'm saying maybe Elise wasn't alone that night. The words struck the air like thunder. Martha's chest tightened. Stop. We're not turning this into blame. But she could feel the unease tightening between them. Then, from outside, the sound of water shifting. Slow, deliberate. They froze. Martha stepped out first. The mist over the lake had thickened again, curling like smoke. And there, near the edge of the dock, something gleamed beneath the surface. "Robert," she whispered, "there's something down there." He grabbed a rope and flashlight, kneeling to peer into the dark water. The beam cut through the murk, illuminating the outline of something metallic. A car. Daniel's car. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. "It's been here all along." Robert's voice was hoarse. "They never pulled it from the lake. The wreck they found must have been staged." Martha's legs nearly gave out. She stared into the shifting depths, the ghostly shape of the car emerging bit by bit as the mist lifted. "He's still down there," she whispered. The realization stole her breath. Not a memory now, not a metaphor. Daniel had never left. Robert's voice trembled. "There's something else in the driver's seat." He stripped off his coat and waded into the freezing water, flashlight clamped between his teeth. The current tugged at him, cold and unrelenting. Martha and Claire held the rope tight from the dock. Minutes stretched like hours. Then Robert surfaced, gasping, pale. He clutched a sealed plastic pouch in his hand. Inside was another phone, Daniel's original cell, corroded but intact. He dragged himself back to the dock, coughing. He must have locked it before he went under. Martha took the phone with trembling hands. It was dead, of course, but she held it like a relic, like a heartbeat that had been waiting to start again. Claire whispered, "If we can get it charged." Martha nodded. "We'll know everything." Back inside the cabin, they found an old charger that miraculously fit. The moment the phone powered on, the screen flickered, faint, ghost-like. One message sat unread. One video file, timestamp the night of the crash. Martha pressed play. Daniel appeared, this time not in the car, but standing by the lake, his breath fogging in the cold. His eyes were wild. Behind him, 2 headlights glowed faintly in the distance. He spoke quickly, fear threading through every word. "Martha, if they find this, I'm gone. Elise tried to warn me. It wasn't her. It was someone else. Someone close. She said the company wasn't the only one laundering money. It was personal." He glanced behind him. "They're here." Then, just before the camera cut off, Daniel turned sharply toward the light and shouted one name. It was muffled by the static, but Martha heard it. Clear. Undeniable. "Claire." The screen went black. The phone slipped from Martha's hand. The silence that followed was unbearable. Claire backed away, shaking her head violently. "No. No, that's not what you think." Martha's voice was hollow. "He called your name. I didn't hurt him," Claire cried. "He called me because he thought I could help. He said if anything happened, I'd know who was behind it." Robert stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Then who was it, Claire? Who were you protecting?" Claire's tears streamed down, her voice breaking. "Your company wasn't laundering money, Robert. Daniel told me it was his own family trust. Your name's on those documents, too." The world seemed to still. Martha's gaze snapped toward Robert. "What?" Robert didn't answer. He simply looked at her, guilt flickering behind his eyes like the last glow of a dying fire. "I didn't want it to go this way," he said softly. "He found out too much." Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. "You killed him." Robert's jaw clenched. "No, I tried to save him. But when the car went into the lake, I didn't go back. He took a step forward, and the old phone on the table buzzed to life again. The same number, Daniel Harrow. 3 words appeared on the screen. You're not done. The lights flickered. The lake groaned. And outside, from somewhere in the fog, came the sound of footsteps on the dock. Slow, deliberate, familiar. Part 8. The Final Call. The lake keeps what it loves. The world outside was a silhouette. Pale mist, water black as ink, trees bowed under the weight of silence. Inside the cabin, the 3 of them stood frozen. The phone, Daniel's number, kept buzzing softly on the table. No one moved. Then Martha reached for it. Her hands didn't shake this time. She pressed answer. For a moment, there was only the low hum of static, a sound like wind passing through hollow wood. Then a voice. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably Daniel's. You found me. Martha's breath caught. Daniel. You weren't supposed to. The voice came in waves, broken, submerged, as though traveling from beneath the lake itself. I told them the truth, but it wasn't enough. Martha's voice trembled. Who did this to you? A pause. Then, he did. Her gaze lifted toward Robert. His face blanched, but he didn't move. You told me to trust him, the voice went on. And I did. I trusted both of you. Martha's tears burned. Daniel, if there's a way to make this right. There isn't, he said softly. But you can stop it from happening again. The call ended. The phone fell silent. No one spoke for a long time. The fire had gone out. Only the lake outside glimmered, faint ripples spreading from nowhere. Finally, Claire whispered, It wasn't an echo, was it? He's been trying to reach you all along. Martha nodded slowly, her voice breaking. He didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. She turned toward Robert. You're going to tell me everything now. Robert sank into the old chair, his face hollow, older than she'd ever seen it. I never meant for it to end this way, he said. The money wasn't the point. It was about the company, the people who owned the patents. Daniel wanted to expose them. He said they were selling defense tech under false names. But if he did, we'd all lose everything. Martha's voice was calm. So you silenced him? Robert looked up sharply. No. I confronted him that night. I begged him to wait, to let me handle it. He wouldn't. He said I was a coward. He exhaled shakily. He was right. He rubbed his face, staring at the floor. When the car went into the lake, I should have gone in after him, but I froze. I told myself it was too late. The admission hung like ash in the air. Martha felt no rage now, only the hollow ache of understanding. The man before her wasn't the monster she'd imagined, just a man who'd loved too little, too late. Claire stood by the window, her reflection trembling in the fogged glass. Then why the phone, Robert? Why was my phone ringing with his face on it? Robert frowned. What are you talking about? "The call," Claire said. "It came from a hidden app, a number that doesn't exist. How could that happen?" Martha looked at Daniel's old phone. It glowed faintly, as if listening. And then, slowly, a message appeared on its cracked screen. "Look outside." They turned toward the window. Through the mist, a faint blue light shimmered over the lake, soft, pulsing, moving closer to shore. Robert whispered, "What is that?" Martha didn't answer. She stepped outside, drawn by something she couldn't name. The air was icy, her breath a thin ribbon of fog. The water lapped softly against the dock. Beneath it, something glowed, the outline of the car, now shifting as if freed from the silt that had held it for years. "Daniel," she whispered. For a moment she saw him, or the memory of him, standing by the water, just as he had in the last video. His eyes calm now. His hand lifted once in farewell, and then, slowly, the glow began to fade. Robert came to stand beside her. "He's letting go." Martha nodded, tears spilling silently. "Or he's asking us to." The water stilled, the mist lifted, and with it, the last echo of Daniel's presence seemed to dissolve into dawn. Later, when the authorities came, they found the car, the evidence, the documents. The scandal broke quietly, in the way such things always do when the truth is inconvenient. Robert was charged, then released pending trial. He left for the city, a shadow of himself. Claire stayed by Martha's side for weeks, helping sort, through papers, photographs, and the echoes of what used to be a family. One evening, as they packed the last box, Martha found a small voice recorder at the back of Daniel's desk. Curious, she pressed play. "Mom, if you're hearing this, it means the lake kept its promise. Don't mourn me too long. I loved you. You were the only thing in my life that felt real. And when the phone rings again, don't be afraid. It's just me saying goodbye." The message ended with a soft laugh. Daniel's laugh. Warm, alive, impossibly near. Martha pressed the recorder to her chest. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered. That night, the lake was calm. No fog, no storm, just silver moonlight gliding across the surface. Martha sat alone on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand. The phone, the one that had started it all, rested beside her. Silent. And then, just before dawn, it lit up one last time, calling Daniel Harrow. She smiled through her tears and let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The screen went dark, but in the faint echo of the water, she thought she heard a whisper, gentle as the wind, final as peace itself. "Thank you." The sun rose over the lake, gilding the world in gold. Martha closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the quiet settle not as grief, but as grace.